Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Books and Beyond. We are back with another Tara and Michelle episode. And today we are going to be talking about myths, books versus adaptations. What makes some successful and what makes some flop. Over the last 10 years, there have been so many adaptations of myths in different formats, whether it is movies, TV shows, and the like. And this is not a new phenomenon. I remember growing up watching Ramayana on TV after school, Amar Chitra Katha. Our fascination with myths dates back to thousands and thousands and thousands of years. In fact, the first myth that was recorded was the story of Gilgamesh, which is recorded in 5000 BCE. Michelle, what was your favorite and first sort of in way or memory of your of Indian mythology?
For viewers who don't know, I wasn't in India for a very long time. So I was born and raised in Bahrain. And I remember really looking forward to our vacations because that's when I used to come down and actually get books. And I remember looking at books which had Indian mythological stories. And one story that has always stayed with me is Eklavya's, who, because of his dedication towards his guru, right, where he learns archery and he actually has to, cut his thumb in favor of basically his guru, to, sort of this guru dakshina. And that is something that has stayed with me for a very long time. But it's not just that. First time that I actually noticed a book, especially to do with, mythological stories, was I was just traveling by the local train, as I usually do, to come to the bound office. And this cover stood out to me, and I noticed, oh, and this generally as a bookworm, I'm always curious, right? So even if the person has the book open, I always want to see what is the title. Notice it was actually Immortals of Meluha, and it was not the only one. Trust me, literally almost every aisle had somebody reading the same book. And I was really curious, what does this book have, right? What is in it? Is it just the fact that it's based on a Hindu mythology, right? Is it just that because it's the characters in the book are popular? What is it? Then I realized it's a series, So that's you're done with one book, you're already looking forward to the next book, right? And it's sort of this, it creates this curiosity in you to find out what happens next. So I really, really love the fact that he took something which we already knew, which we grew up on, and then he's fictionalized it and made it sort of popular.
What's interesting about this whole thing is, see, these myths have been around for years and years, right? Thousands of years. And Ramayana and Mahabharata, they're not old stories. They're sort of the foundational text for a lot of stories, right?
Yeah.
Like we have this whole concept called universal story structure. And these are texts that actually really follow that very well. What I find really interesting is actually people's obsession with mythology and their obsession to the fact that they are able to study this one text over years and years and years. So we interviewed Asha Sattar and we asked her this question. We said that
Yeah.
she's a Ramayana scholar and she's written about it and she studied it for over 20 years. And we asked her, why is fascination? Why not something else? And she said that it's because it's just that rich. And what makes it so rich, if not just the story and the bare bones of the story itself? Like we all know the broad strokes. We all know that, okay, Ram and Sita get exiled, Sita gets taken by Ravan, there's battle, we know the characters, we know the broad strokes. But within each of those broad strokes, each different cultures over the years have adapted the story in different ways.
Right.
So whether it comes to the way that people talk or whether it comes to, even small variations in the story. And what I find what makes it interesting is not the broad strokes of the myth itself, but the fact that there are so many characters with their own inner lives. And when you think of something like, tip of the iceberg, which is what the saying that authors have, that when you read a book and when you read a character, you are only looking at the tip of the iceberg. Because because the author has created this entire world in order to sort of construct reality. And that is what I find very interesting in these myths, because there are hundreds of characters and they all have their own icebergs. Right. And they all have their own stories. And that's what I find interesting. And I think with books, because you don't have a visual medium, and because the nature of books is such that it is character based, right? As storytellers, and even in movies, but we really can get into inner monologues in a way that I don't think we can yet in movies and film. So I think that that is very interesting in books, and That is why, even though we've seen this huge influx of adaptations, retellings, there's a hunger and appetite for more books, and books are doing well in this. Movies, we'll come to later. But that's my take. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. And I think for me, also the fact that books allow you to visualize the characters and the scenes is way better, because what happens in a movie is literally it's out to you on a platter, right? It's like literally food served to you. But for me, I think it's like when I'm reading a book, it's like being in the kitchen, seeing how the food is prepared, and then imagining it. I really like it. And for me, Tara, like you said, apart from the fact that there are many characters, there are many stories, what I like is the fact that when certain books manage to pick out those characters that are not really covered in every other book. So being a Catholic, I also had access to both Hindu mythology and Christian. So most recently I came across this book by Jeet Thayil, and he's written a book called Names of Women. And I would highly recommend that to everybody, because what he's done is he's picked the women from the Bible who have not been covered and who have been misrepresented in history, right? Common because we have also interviewed writers like Manu Pillai, Ira Mukherjee, and this is a common pattern that we have seen not just with religious texts, with also historical texts where women are actually not given the sort of exposure that they deserve. But apart from representation, I think another thing that I really like in these books is when it makes me think differently. So, for example, I really like the book Business Sutra by Devdutt Pattanaik. Why? Because it actually mixes mythology and uses lessons from mythology to teach sort of management and business. I really like that because I kind of like when two genres mix with each other. So it's not just, taking mythology as is, but then you use it probably in different formats.
Yeah, yeah. But do you think that, like, sort of it's overdone? Like, okay, we've analyzed a little bit about like why books might be super interesting,
Yeah.
and also like authors are finding different characters to talk about. These unheard stories are becoming popular, stories of women, and the wonderful part about this is there's so many characters, so there's enough material for everybody to have fun and everybody to do well also, right? Like, I can think of so many characters that I feel deserve their own books, which I don't know if there's a book. So there's this one character called Shikhandi, who's a very interesting character, and I saw a play on them. And they're a transgender character, right? And I think that was one of the first sort of I never even knew about this character before I went for this play. And the way that this play sort of constructed the whole backstory of them was very interesting. And I just wonder, how many more stories like that. And the play was sort of in a visual format, right? So it was that was interesting. I
No,
think
and can I add to that? Because that is actually a book and it's written by Devdutt Pattanaik. It's Shikhandi and Other Queer Tales. So, yeah, I do think that, of course, I mean, that's just one, but we need more of them.
Maybe we're gonna run out then. Maybe this gravy train is gonna end. Like everything is like, but see, we're talking about like movies versus books, right? So let's address the elephant in the room, right? Like, let's address movies.
Yeah.
Books, yeah, doing well. Let's also address the books that sort of like, let's address also the problematic element. Because so far we've been saying that we love this, we love that. There's enough for everybody. It's just
absolutely.
right. But what is it really like? Is the gravy like? Here are a few questions I have. Like, is the gravy train going to run out? Is this overdone? Like, how many times are we going to portray the same characters? Another question I have is, and we can answer all of these. I'm just saying. Another question I have is that the portrayal of, even though we're taking all these unheard stories of women, the portrayal of women is always, even in books and movies, so forget. Books will be problematic where they upheld to a certain standard of beauty, for example.
Yeah.
And always set in those cultural contexts. Right? So that is to do with retelling. And then there's sort of also the modernization of these myths where you have mythological characters set in modern day settings. Right? Which is another topic also.
Yeah.
But when it comes to movies, like for example, this Adipurush movie,
Yes.
right? It didn't do well.
Yeah.
At all.
Why?
Why didn't it do well?
Exactly. So I have a really interesting take on it. Of course, see, whatever I know is from whatever I've read in the media. I've also spoken to a few friends and all of that, and I have seen clips of the movie, right? So what I honestly think is there is a very fine line between staying true to the sort of historical text that you have, that is, the original sort of text, and we know that there have been many versions of it, and modernizing it, right? So I was just imagining this, like if there was a modern retake on let's say Jesus' life, and we are like, hey dude, what's up? We're like, how I can imagine that. Which
So
is
what did Adipurush do exactly?
what, from whatever I know, is the fact that, see, the dialogues were very colloquial. It was sort of used in a slang that we use nowadays, and also that kind of that you use in everyday life. With let's say your friends, with people So I would say too casual, right? So
What?
so okay. So it is. I don't. It is a little. I would say disrespectful. So literally, there is a scene where I think Hanuman's tail is caught on fire. I'm not really sure exactly what, but I think yeah, his tail is caught on fire. And then this person standing behind him, he says, "Oh, Jalina." So, so it is a lot of people found it offensive, and I do understand why, because see, I think that it also, with Hindu mythological creatures, we also have treated them, like gods. We revere them. We've grown up with their stories. Like worshipping them. So, and what is interesting is, because of the backlash, within a couple of days, the team actually changed the dialogues. They've literally uh, took all the feedback, changed the dialogues, and released the movie in the current version.
I think that's very interesting. I think like comparing it to Brahmastra, which is also has which is an original story but has roots and takes a lot of tropes from mythology. I think whatever I know of Adi Purush is that it's the exact same story. Even the clothes, all of that. If you look at sort of like the imagery, it looks very sort of like what we expect that period to look like. And then you have this dialogue which is super contrast.
Yeah.
Versus setting it versus sort of like a
Yes.
modern retelling where you have the character, actually like very much in the social and cultural milieu of the times, wearing the clothes that we wear, and it's a modern retelling where you like sort of like
Everything fits in.
yeah,
Yeah.
everything fits in. So I think that I think maybe sort of is interesting as well.
No, and I wanted to add, since you mentioned Brahmastra, a lot of people also, I think, have realized that sometimes we get carried away with VFX in movies, right? Because, see, in a book, if you don't have a story, you have nothing, literally, right? But in a movie, I think what happens with especially these mythological stories is, you focus so much on VFX that the story is then falls flat. Right? Dialogues fall flat, right? Sort of. So I do think that it is a little bit trickier when it comes to movies to kind of do justice to everything, because so many people acting in it. Like, just imagine, like Amish Tripathi or Devdutt, but now it's one person, one mind. You literally, it's your take on it. But I think in a movie, it's also the actors. What I find interesting, Dara, the actors who kind of portray, let's say, somebody who's Ram in a movie, and this is what I'd heard long back. The Ramayana that came out in Doordarshan. It was the first actor who acted like Ram. He was literally revered in life. Like, people used to fall at his feet and literally be like, oh, like they consider him as this remaining, a very, very important person. It's interesting because I feel it influences them. So it is different in a movie.
Yeah, I think it is different in movies. Like Margaret Atwood had gone to the Jaipur Lit Fest, and Margaret Atwood had said that somebody asked her, "Are books ever going to go out of fashion or something like this?" If you got the question, the basic gist was that she said that in a movie you need production people, you need
Yes.
budgets, you need all of these things to create the world. But in a book, you just need a writer and a pen,
Yeah.
and you can create anything that you want.
To add to that, so there is a upcoming movie that I recently saw. It's called Surpanagai, and it is based on Surpanaka. And it's basically, we are talking about characters who have commonly appeared in a lot of things. And that is, of course, Ram, Sita, Krishna, Arjun. We have seen these characters time and again, and there's nothing wrong in that, right? But I do think that other characters also deserve some space, and I think Surpanaka, being a feminine sort of icon, we haven't seen much of her. So there is a coming up movie. And what I interesting is that, see, while these books that are popular in mythology that we are seeing right now, they're all in English, right? But these adaptations that we are seeing, they're also in regional language. So, for example, Bahubali, since we're talking about success, what makes it successful, I think Bahubali is a very good example of a mythological, let's say, a remake that has become successful. So if you think of why, what are the things that what I actually read up a lot on this, right? I do think that it's a mixture of factors, Tara. It's not just the let's say the writing, or not just the VFX, or all of that. See, in this, for example, some people speculate that it is the marketing that went behind it. Apparently, 2 years before the release, the promotion started, right? Yeah. And the second thing is, let's say, obviously a very reputed director, S.S. Rajmouli, and the third thing is the fact that, from India, we have been consuming Western stories for ages, correct? So there's Lord of the Rings, there's Harry Potter, there's Game of Thrones. These are things that we have been obviously, being big fans of. But we didn't have sort of an Indian version. And with Bahubali, what happened is they literally dubbed the movie in all regional languages. Everyone had their own version. I feel owning your own version or owning your own sort of, mythology makes a very big difference.
No, I agree with that. Yeah. I like what you said about Surpanakha. And I actually really enjoyed her story because it was the story about how sort of she's Ravan's sister, right? And her nose gets cut
Yeah.
off, right? And it also made me think about how typically in books we are seeing and movies, we see that the evil characters always look evil. They look, whatever, they deformed. And the good characters always beautiful. Yeah. Fun fact in Apple TV, if you watch the shows, if you see all of the villains have Android phones and all of the heroes have iPhones. Notice that? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is. I love
There's a lot of subconscious elements going on with the content you're consuming, but that is a whole other topic.
Induction. Okay, I don't know.
Yeah, obviously. That is
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
in terms of representation, definitely, I think books have been, we talked about books and even plays because of budgeting issues. Probably they have been able to take on and give voice to these lesser known characters.
Yeah.
But in a movie, typically what happens in these movies is they're very big budget movies. And because VFX, all of these things.
Yeah.
And they need to recoup their costs. But I don't think, for a director to make a movie in an unknown character might make sense. Maybe that is why, they're going for the same stories again, all those big budget kind of movies versus sort of more character based.
But I have something to add here, man, which is interesting because I mean, I recently watched a movie called Renfield. Okay, and I was thinking, this Renfield character, I've not heard of him. And what was interesting is that he is literally Dracula's sidekick. I didn't know that Dracula even had a sidekick, right? And I do think that that is a very good example. Because I do get your point where, if you're investing a lot of money, if you literally want crowds to come and see a movie and you're like, okay, but who's this? I don't know. But I do think that Renfield does it very well. Why? Because you've never heard of that. Basically you've never heard their story, but without them, the main character wouldn't exist. Like it's kind of like these unsung heroes around them. So what Renfield does is he literally gets victims. For Dracula, he's literally sort of like and Dracula manipulates him, gaslights him, all of that. The whole movie is based on that. So I do think that there is an opportunity, but maybe the marketing or the sort of communication that goes out in the public could be using the main character as well.
Correct. I think another interesting adaptation of a modern, because we spoke about retellings and taking characters and telling their stories. And now I want to speak a little bit about situating characters in modern settings. Because I find that very interesting. What you said, right? Like imagine like this it's black kind of blasphemous. You're looking at Jesus Christ in a modern setting. And a book that comes to my mind is Samsara by Saksham, which was basically sort of like it reminded me of Percy Jackson. And I really used to love Percy Jackson books because it was basically he took the foundation was Greek mythology, and Percy Jackson was the son of Poseidon. But he was a teenage boy growing up in like America and all of those things. And then suddenly he gets transported into this colony of other half demigods, half gods, who have different powers. So like the modern day superheroes, but the foundation was sort of the
Origin
the
story.
origin story. And I really liked Saksham Garg's book because he kind of did the same thing where you have, a group of kids and sort of the origin was a lot in Hindu mythology.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting. And another modern retelling, I'm trying to think, what movies? Like, have we seen like modern retellings of movies? I think there'd be a lot of, look at what happened in Adipurush. I think there'd be a lot of backlash if suddenly I took Sita and I dressed her up in like
Modern,
dress.
in modern
Yeah,
clothes,
what would
happen?
happen? I can't even like
Yeah.
begin to
No,
think
it's very scary. I can't even imagine.
like you can definitely do more in books, which is why I think these books have also proliferated.
Yeah.
And very few like the only like film or movies that I remember watching about Mahabharata and Ramayana that I really liked was when I was a kid. We watched a cartoon version, like a Japanese cartoon version of
Really?
Ramayana, and that was so well done. And talking about story, every day after school, even I used to come home and I had grandmother, and me and my grandmother would watch this Ramayana series every day. And what I remember of it was the fight series, the fighting. Okay. And they had all these different asuras, they not asuras, they different astras,
Weapons.
like weapons where they were fighting with each other. That time I was so blown away. I thought the VFX was amazing. I don't know how like things have progressed from there to now with better technology, but those shows I think were special unto themselves. Maybe I don't know because you're truer at heart or something that they're doing that these movies cannot capture right now, which I have not seen.
And what I find interesting is Japanese. I mean, I didn't know that, right? So it's really interesting to see how another culture sort of adapts to another one, right? Because I also feel that when we come to our own mythology, they're very protective. Like it's ours. But I think I'm going to check this out right after this episode. I want to see how the Japanese envision this. But apart from all the movies and the films that we have covered, I do think that there is a lot of scope in accessing mythologies in Indian mythologies, but I would say not just Hindu mythology. So, for example, let's say there are Northeast folklore mythology where there's a lot of magic also, like for example, Assamese folklore, or for example, Buddhist, or even Christian. And Christian, I do understand that because it's a lot in the West. But what about Indian Christian? I do think that there are these sort of variations which are not covered, and I really hope to see that. Because I think that there are writers out there who want to do different things. So, for example, Anuja Chandramouli, right? So she's written this book Mohini, which actually imagines Vishnu's feminine form, right? So you do have different variations, even if you're actually exploring the same character. So I think for me, I want to see those changes in comic book.
It reminds me there's this Goan painter that I've forgotten his name, but basically what he does is he paints sort of like biblical images, but like the main characters, so Mary and Jesus, they're all brown people. So it's like South Asian.
Very nice.
So
Oh,
it's
I have to check it out.
yeah, I'll find the name and give it to you. But
Yes. And we also put it in the show notes.
yeah,
Because I've seen
it reminds me of like what we said about like adaptations and local retellings and how these stories are universal.
Yeah.
I myself personally love mythology and can't get enough of mythology.
Yeah.
I love Hindu mythology. I've read all Chitra Banerjee's books, obviously.
Yes.
I find it very interesting.
And we also interviewed her.
And we also interviewed her, and I understand why people can't get enough of it because uh, for me at least it's sort of also it's very reminiscent of my childhood, so it's like comfort food in a way. Mythology is like comfort food, which is a strange thing to say, but this is something that I have grown up with, which is why I don't tire of these stories. And I think that's a way the case for a lot of sort of like Indians who may have grown up with these stories, or I read the Bible. I read a children's version of the Bible when I was I went to a Catholic school. So for me, even that, like, those stories sort of take me back to my childhood. So they're never ending. They're very interesting. And Greek mythology, recently I've gone into Greek mythology. Because there are a lot of retellings and
A lot of new books.
a lot of new books on that, and people have really sort of like gone, into that genre. I read Stephen Fry's Mythos, which is sort of like classical myths. So he just like told the stories as is. And even there, like I'm just always so amazed at like the amount of stories that we are able to produce as a civilization. And just to end like the whole section is that I was reading Yuval Noah Harari's *Sapiens*, the graphic novel version, and I read the print copy as well. The graphic novel version is beautifully done, and in it he was saying that basically, as humans we are storytellers. So even before, and we had an oral tradition, even before we started writing things down, we used to live in small bands, so small tribes of people. So it was not like organized how it is today with like with religion. Even in terms of like our mythology, we have like so many people interested in Greek, Hindu. There's four. What he said basically was because we were organized in little tribes all over the world of few thousand people. Each tribe had their own mythology, their own folklore, their own culture. So at one point in the world, there would have been at least like, I don't know, countless million cultures. And that is changing so much right now because as we're homogenizing and globalizing, to think of a time when like, you would have just gone to sort of a tribe like 5 days away from you, and you would have been immersed in a completely different sort of like storytelling, completely different like
I just want to time travel now.
Completely different mythology. This is a prehistory. You know, is very, very interesting. Whereas now, we're doing the same stories and the same canonical texts all over and over again. So maybe it's the time for us to invent new modern mythologies. And I wonder who's going to do that. AI. AI. Yeah. Mythology.
Oh, how can I forget about AI? Yes, yes. I definitely think AI is going to come up with its own characters, probably 20, 30 years down the
Harry
line.
Potter could be our new mythology.
Yeah, I mean, literally, if you think
No,
of
I know people
robots.
have a problem with the author. And there's another conversation, art versus artist. But
Yes. No, but I do think that AI can come up with more interesting mythological creatures. Why not robots? Half robots, half humans.
Okay, so we've covered so many things, different characters, books versus movies, what is mythology, is there too much, is there too little, all of it. And there's way more. But the main question is, what is the formula? What makes something successful? What makes something a flop? Why are Amish Tripathi's books so successful? Why do we love Amar Chitra Katha? Why did we really tank Adipurush? Why did those TV serials of Ramayana do so well when all these movies are not doing well? What is the answer? Well, newsflash, I don't have it. But I can give my opinion, and I think one thing is that uh, a lot of times, like movie directors, we spoke about a few points. So to summarize, my opinion is that lesser known characters, maybe movie producers don't want to put the money behind it because it's all about sort of like big budget movies, especially with the advent of OTT. To get people into the cinema, you need to do a lot of VFX. A lot of money is being spent on VFX, maybe not enough on script sentiments of people. If you do modernize certain elements, what would those sentiments be? Books maybe because they don't have as much of a mass market appeal. They're also in English, so you're talking to the books that we read in English. You're talking to a different audience. You don't have the budgetary constraints, so you can play around more. You can go deeper. You can explore new facets which you may not have been able to in movies today. And you also hurting the sentiments and all of those things, you can take those risks. So maybe that is the reason. But I don't know the formula because as I mentioned, those TV shows were just they did so well. I'm sure there are going to be movies based on myths that are coming up in the future that will be doing well. One example of a modern adaptation and a movie that had done well is Rajniti, which took inspiration a lot from the Mahabharata. That movie did really, really well. Right? So there's no one formula. We don't know, fun fact, interesting. I actually had gone for this conference at Dharma Productions. Okay. Yeah. And we had the chance to sort of hear from the CEO. And it was very, very interesting because we just kept asking. We were like, what is the formula? How do you know? Like as content creators, you want to know it. We what works. We make things. We want to know what works. We want to know what is the formula. And even he said, things are changing so fast right now. In terms of like not only technology, not only in the way we consume things, in the way we are thinking, right? Politics, sentiments are changing so fast, such a fast changing world. You really can't predict what will go and what will. So we can have our own opinions. As I've said, I have my opinions and my own reasons, which I said earlier as well in the summary. But the answer is that everybody is sort of it is a state of flux, and I'm just looking forward to seeing what comes next and analyzing it even more and understanding. Yeah.
Well, same here. I think all the points you mentioned, I totally agree. I also do feel that there is a very fine line between being creative with the text that already exists out there that you've been seeing over the years, and being tolerant about it, right? So what I think that we need to do more in the future to see more successful films is, as you said, trial and error. See, we often don't know what works and what doesn't work. So I honestly think that if more storytellers are given more chances to explore. And just explore. It can tank, it can work, whatever. But I think if we have more creative freedom and we can actually explore, very interesting sides to characters. Like what I mean is, why always a serious take? Why not make, for example, why not take these characters and have very, make them quirky, make them funny. I do think that, like, also treating it in a light manner will make it also more interesting. But yeah, even I don't have an answer. I'm just hoping that there'll be more scope. I would say, more takes on, let's say, different tones, using the same characters or different characters.
That's interesting. So more mythology, we're all for it.
Yes, absolutely.
So, what did you think? Is there a formula? Why are some mythological adaptations, books, movies, films successful, not successful? Why are some retellings successful, not successful? Let us know. Write to us on our social media. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode and let us know what we should cover next.
Yeah, thank you.